Let's Read Clips, which features daily 8 to 10 minute scary story videos with one story per video, getting you right into the action. You can find the links down in the description or pinned comment. And thank you all again so much.
I've been a big fan of this channel for a long time. I had never had a story that made me think that it was worth sharing until recently. This is my first time posting something like this, but I felt like I should since it is something that will most likely stick with me forever. For context, I'm a male and I work at a gas station in the Deep South, a part of Louisiana that most people have never even heard of. I'm talking about dirt roads with no name, thick trees that seem to swallow darkness, and you might be lucky enough to see a streetlight every other mile. The little gas station that I work at is located in the trifecta of all these elements. I, of course, work the overnight shifts. The gas station doesn't see much excitement. There are either the 10 customers that come in between the hours of 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., or the random possums that decide to make the trash cans outside their personal drum set, but I digress. The night started like any other night. Make sure that the coffee is fresh, check. Make sure all the snacks, cold drinks, and beer are properly stocked, check. Now all that is left for me to do is, well, wait. I stood behind the counter, looking at inventory, listening to music, and just pacing around for the first couple of hours. You know the thing that people say, time flies? Yeah, that didn't apply to that shift. As I got bored, I decided to leave the register and check out the items on the shelf to, make sure nothing majestically sold itself. While I was on one of the aisles, I heard a man call out, "Hey, y'all open?" I turned around to see that I had 2 customers standing at the checkout. Now, I should mention this gas station does not have that fancy system that makes the doors go ding when someone comes in. Top-line security, right? So I was caught off guard that 2 customers had come in without my knowledge. I quickly walked up to the register and apologized for the wait. As we were making the usual conversation of, "Hey, how you doing?" and "Man, it's dark out here in this area," the customer asked another question that is usually always asked. "How long is it until I get to the city from here?" I answered it with the same answer that seems to automatically live in my mind rent-free. It's a good couple hours from here, just go towards the lights." Corny, I know, but that's my thing. Anyway, after scanning the customer's items, which literally was a candy bar and a bottle of water, I told them, "Hey, be careful out there, y'all. There's a tornado warning in this area until 7 a.m. and the rain's picking up." In this area, even on a clear night, it's hard to see what is ahead of you on these dark, desolate roads. As I went to look at the second customer, I realized there was no second customer anymore. I chalked it up to the guy not wanting to wait any longer and decided to just leave. I mean, from what I saw, he didn't have any items with him and probably only needed some cigarettes or something that was behind the counter. I told my customer farewell and was ready to grind out the rest of these hours, but just like a psychic, my own words had foreshadowed my fate for the night. Not long after the customer left, it might have been an hour or so, the sky could no longer hold its sorrow and just wept gallons of tears from above. To me, this is not a big deal. Bad weather, rain, and possums, yeah, I still have it out for them, happen a lot in my area. So much so that I call the experience HWA, which stands for humid, wet, and annoying. As the rain and wind picked up, I started to feel a little uneasy. Mostly because, honestly, I would rather be at my house when the rain and wind decided to battle for dominance. With that being said, the inevitable happened. The power lines were no match for the relentless punishment from the elements, and then darkness, silence, aggravation. The power had gone out, and there was no backup generator for me. I was just there, standing in a blanket of darkness so thick that it seemed to cover everything in its embrace. I called my manager to let him know that the power had gone out and asked him what I should do right now. Of course, with it being so late/early, whatever 4 a.m. means to you, there was no response. I thought about locking up and just buckling down at the gas station until the storm passed. After all, I was getting paid. But that's when I heard it. Between the thunder, between the rain, between the wind, I heard a slight crunch coming from one of the aisles further away from the entrance of the station. At first, I paid no mind to the sound. I believed it to just be store items shifting with all of the terrible weather. Darkness had a way of bending your mind, making you see and hear things that your mind usually dismisses as just the wind. But after sitting there for a while, upset of course, but getting paid, I called my manager again, but unfortunately no answer. Then, right after the light of my phone faded and my eyes were trying to adjust to the darkness, I heard it again. Movement. Movement, but this time closer, and right in between my phone call and a thunderstrike. Like I said, I have listened to this channel for years, so now I'm on high alert. Someone was in here. I was not alone. I just knew it. I tried to calm my nerves, not wanting to be that guy who overreacts, but I asked myself, can you ever really be too safe? I made a potentially dangerous and thoughtless move. I stood up and yelled, "Is anybody still in here?" I got no response, but that didn't mean that there was no one there. The air felt thick from humidity. Not just that, though. That feeling you get when you're not alone. The feeling of being watched, as cliche as it sounds. I remembered something that I knew all along. There is no ding on the door to let me know when customers enter or exit. That and the thought of that second customer came to mind. I never saw him leave. I just knew that he was there and then gone. Automatically, without a doubt, felt that something was strange, something was not right. So I did what any gas station worker would do in the pitch black. Pretended to be a ninja so that I could slowly make my way to the source of the noise without being caught. As it turns out, I'm not a ninja. The moment I stepped from behind the counter that I had been sitting behind, a voice stopped me in my tracks. "Give me what you got," was all that the void softly spoke to me. I froze, scared, too scared to say a word or move an inch. When I called out, I wasn't truly expecting a response. Soon I heard footsteps, slow but getting closer. My mind yelled, "Do something, run, charge at the sound and hope for the best." After all of that, though, I did nothing. Then his face appeared. A face that I wouldn't have seen if my manager hadn't called me back at that moment, allowing my phone to light up. The second customer. As it turns out, he never left. I pretended not to see or know that I recognized him, and again he repeated, "Come on, give me what you got, now." Still in a calm and calculating way. I spoke for the first time after noticing that I was holding my breath the whole time. "All I have is $250 in the register." He was quiet for a while, but then told me, "Give it over." I wish that I could say that I pulled out some special move that brought the guy down, allowing me to hold him until the police showed up. But this is real life. I gave him the money, and luckily for me, he accepted it. He knew that the police would not be here in these parts at this time, and with this weather, and even if called, it would take at least 30 minutes to get there. A local, I assumed. It had to be so confident. I talked to the manager and the police after all was said and done. My manager apologized that I had to go through that and also apologized for not answering sooner. I told him no worries, everyone deserves sleep. I got to leave early, and the manager closed the store for a couple of hours until the next employees came in. I was so lost in a trance after that situation that I truly believed that it still couldn't be real. That couldn't have just happened to me after a couple of years of working there. And that was that, I thought. A funny plot twist. 2 weeks later, a man was caught trying to hold up a gas station close to where my job was located. A man that I remembered from that flash of light on my phone. The only difference is, he didn't get away this time. The thing that I can really say that I've learned from all of this is, no matter how comfortable or how much you think you know how each day will play out, always, always be on guard. I was released from a mental health section in 2005. I was left homeless and had to move in with an old friend as my family had disowned me. During this time, my friend's best mate from the flat above befriended me, and me and Ryan became really good friends. The more I lived in this block of flats, the easier I had made more friends. Sadly, we were all alcoholics, and we would wake up early to start drinking, and we called ourselves the Breakfast Club, as we would get up early and just drink away the day. One particularly sunny morning, we decided to go sit by the canal and have a more scenic view for our liquid breakfast. As we were joking, a man we didn't know approached us and asked for a cigarette. Ryan obliged, and we accepted him into our little group, and we continued to drink. As it started to enter late afternoon, we decided to go our separate ways, and we walked back to our flats. Ryan took home the stranger, as he had said that he had more booze at home, and they seemed to enjoy each other's company. My friend Annie and I thought nothing of it as we said goodbye. As 8 a.m. the next day rolled round, we were surprised Ryan had knocked on the door to rouse us of another summer day of drinking and laughs, so we made our way up to the next floor to see if he was ready to come to the shops. There was no answer from us obnoxiously ringing the doorbell or knocking, so Annie opened the letterbox to shout Ryan, and that's when she looked at me frantically, saying, There's blood. I can just see blood." I asked what was going on and told her to stop being silly, but then I looked through the letterbox myself. I was left panicked, as the only thing in his flat I could really see was just covered in blood. Annie, in a total confusion and panic, ran back down the stairs to get Ryan's spare key. As we entered the flat, the stench of iron and blood filled our nostrils, and as we approached the kitchen, we found Ryan dead, almost decapitated, lying next to his hatchet that he had kept for self-defense. The man we had befriended had been the murderer, and to this day I feel guilty for it. The man had claimed that Ryan had flirted with him, and he had felt afraid, so he killed our good friend in what he described as a gay panic self-defense. The brutality he displayed seemed to go beyond self-defense, though. He even removed his own clothes and put on some of Ryan's before being caught on CCTV leaving the block. This monster received only 4 years in prison for taking the life of our wonderfully bright friend who had never wronged anyone. He was gay, but was harmless, and regardless of what this monster had said. And soon after, I left the block and rebuilt my life. I'm now the only remaining member of the Breakfast Club. Annie carried the guilt of allowing Ryan to bring that man back, and she died at the age of 44 from a broken heart and her alcoholism. I'm now 44 with 3 kids and a better life, and I'll never forget those people. They taught me a lot about life, and they took me in, and I just wish that they could have achieved more and known how much they were loved. I don't usually write a lot, but there's something that's been weighing heavily on my mind, and I feel the need to share it. It happened when I was just 13 years old, and although it occurred fairly recently, there's certain details of that incident that still remain a hazy memory. Nevertheless, I'll do my best to recount the night that forever changed my life. The amusement park, the only renowned one in our state, had recently opened its gates as the seasons transitioned into summer. For privacy reasons, I won't disclose the park's name or the ride where this unsettling event occurred. Typically, I visited the park once or twice a year with my friends, family, and occasionally my parents. We would roam around, indulge in tasty treats, and experience the thrill of the rides, just regular kid stuff. However, this particular visit was destined to make me swear off amusement parks for the rest of my days. It was a chilly night, that mix of cold and warm. However, the sky remained clear, which was all the confirmation my friends Nick and Caden and I needed to ask our parents if we could go. Miraculously, they agreed, and in no time, we found ourselves being dropped off at the park's entrance, brimming with excitement, ready to immerse ourselves in the vibrant, thrilling attractions. Among them, there was one ride that stood out as my personal favorite, and I'm certain my friends felt the same way. Housed inside a dome-shaped building, this exhilarating ride dazzled us with a whirlwind of spinning lights and adrenaline-pumping speeds. It seemed like the perfect choice, except for one thing: the dreaded line. Not only was it a claustrophobic person's worst nightmare, but it almost always guaranteed an agonizing wait of at least an hour. On that particular occasion, the line stretched so far that it reached one of the neighboring rides about 100 yards away. Seeing this, we let out exasperated sighs, realizing that we had no choice but to endure the line before we could move on. We figured we might as well just get it out of the way early. As the line snaked its way forward, we noticed that on the left side, where the line extended towards the forest, there were shrubs and bushes. My friends and I didn't pay much attention to them at first, which is why we failed to notice something peculiar until we reached the large sign bearing the ride's name. It was Caden who first spoke up, excitement laced with a hint of concern evident in his voice.
"Did you guys see that?"
he exclaimed, pointing in the direction of the forest. "No, what are you talking about?" Nick replied, glancing over at the bushes. Curiosity piqued, I looked in the same direction. There, crouched down among the foliage, was a person wearing a Jason Voorhees mask. Initially, we found it amusing, thinking that it was part of some Halloween-themed event or party that the amusement park occasionally hosted in October. However, it was July, a fact that should have raised some more suspicion. Whether it was ignorance or just us being naive kids, we chuckled, assuming it was some kid playing a harmless prank. Our attention quickly returned to the ride, and we dismissed the incident as an inconsequential oddity. We endured the line for a grueling 2 hours, and despite the relatively brief 5-minute ride itself, it was undeniably worth the wait. Afterward, we decided to grab a bite to eat and enjoy a few more attractions. Time flew by, and before we knew it, it was time to head back to the parking lot where our parents would be waiting. Unlike other kids who would typically complain, we welcomed the idea of leaving as exhaustion started to creep in. Amusement parks can be quite demanding. Navigating through the throngs of people, also making their way towards the exit, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a glimpse of that very same Jason Voorhees mask. This time I managed to catch a glimpse of the full figure behind it. The person was massive, towering at least 6'6", with a build reminiscent of a freight train. This man was a behemoth, and it became glaringly evident that it wasn't just some kid playing a childish prank. Subtly urging my friend to quicken their pace, we hustled toward the exit. As we reached the dark expanse of the parking lot, I finally gathered the courage to share what I had seen. I told them what I saw and how big the guy was, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief. "Yeah, right," Nick responded, who was always the skeptic, especially when it came to this sort of stuff. Caden, however, remained silent, his gaze fixated on the park behind us, and uneasiness apparent in his eyes. "No, seriously," I insisted, my voice growing more urgent as Nick and I engaged in a brief back and forth. Caden's next words cut through our heated exchange, causing us to pause and snap our heads back in the direction of the park. Little did I know that his revelation would unleash an unprecedented terror, leaving an indelible mark on my childhood memories. "Guys, look!" Caden screamed, his voice tinged with terror as he began sprinting toward the parking lot. At first, all I could see were the masses of people flooding out of the park. I didn't understand what had spooked him so profoundly, and Nick appeared equally confused. And then I saw it. The Jason Voorhees mask once again. This time, the significance of its presence registered in our minds, and we bolted in sheer panic. The colossal figure, adorned with the mask, was hurtling towards us at an alarming speed, clutching something in his hand, a mysterious cloth that I never had a chance to examine closely. We ran as if though our lives depended on it, eventually catching up to Caden in the vast expanse of the parking lot. Together, we gasped for breath, scanning our surroundings in a frenzied state until we spotted my parents' car. Without wasting a second, we scrambled inside, screaming at them to floor it. Although they wore expressions of bewilderment and concern, my dad pressed down on the accelerator, propelling us away from that nightmare as swiftly as possible. Interrogation became the theme of our 1-hour car ride back home, and it was Nick who mustered up the courage to offer brief one-word answers to our parents' relentless questions. In truth, all of us were still reeling from the shock, struggling to process the enormity of what had just occurred. To this day, I remained baffled by the man's intentions. What did he want with us? Why did he single us out? Why did he do this with a ton of people around? And what horrors awaited us if he had managed to close the distance between us? I vowed never to return to that specific amusement park, although I've visited a few others since then. Nevertheless, you can bet your bottom dollar that I always keep a vigilant eye, forever wary of the lurking shadows, for you never know who might be hiding in the darkness, waiting to pounce. Hi, my name's Addy. I've been listening to some podcasts, which is why I ended up here. For the introduction, this story happened in 2019. My sister and I were international students in Sydney, Australia. Since we were on a tight budget, we rented a room for about 4 months. The house had 3 bedrooms, but none of them had locks. The first room was occupied by the brother of the owner. Let's call him D. D was in his early 40s, around 5'11", had brown skin and an average body type. The second room was occupied by D's friend, let's call him F. F was in his early 60s, probably 6'1" tall, and also had an average body type. Lastly, our room, the third room, was shared by me and my sister. It wasn't a big deal for us since we are very close, and as I mentioned before, we were on a tight budget. We knew D because he was a friend of my aunt. Now to the story. I arrived from work, rested for a bit, and then went to take a shower. It was probably around 7-ish p.m., and since it was winter, it was pitch black outside. When you enter our shower, on the right side, there's a big sliding glass window painted white so that no one can see inside unless you open the window. Behind the window was our backyard with a table and chairs. As I went for a shower, I noticed that the window was slightly open, just a bit. I didn't pay much attention, thinking that I couldn't be seen from outside because it was only a very small opening. After finishing my shower, I was going to the kitchen to get some food when D came in from the backyard with his dog. I said hi and continued with what I was doing. And months had passed, and my sister and I were studying and working, so most of the time we weren't home during the day, only using the room to sleep at night. One time my sister had a late afternoon shift, which was not her typical schedule as she usually worked in the early morning. I left for work and my sister was still sleeping, covered with a blanket since it was winter. We have the same body type, 5 foot and petite, so sometimes you can't tell if there's someone under the blanket or if it's just pillows. My sister then woke up as she heard some noise in the room. She opened her eyes and saw some of our panties scattered on the floor. She thought that I might be running late and just threw everything on the floor. Then she saw our housemate, F, searching in our laundry basket, looking for something. She also noticed that F was sniffing our panties. She was horrified and scared because F was a huge man. My sister pretended that she didn't see anything and asked F if he was looking for a charger. F was shocked to see that my sister was in our bed, and he quickly said yes, that he was just looking for a charger. After a few minutes, F came back to our room and asked my sister not to tell anyone about what had happened earlier. My sister agreed because she was afraid that F might do something bad to her. She went to work and texted me about what had happened. I was shocked and afraid to go home because I usually got home first. My sister then told D what had happened. I didn't go inside the house without D being there, and I waited outside for him. We went inside without any conversation. He then installed a lock on our door that night, and after that my sister and I moved out after a week. But before we moved, I was folding all of our clothes, and I remembered that I still had some clothes hanging outside in the backyard. It was pitch black, but when my eyes adjusted to the dark, I went to go get our clothes. As I looked around, my eyes caught sight of a very small opening in the shower, and to my shock, even from outside, through that very tiny opening, you could see everything happening inside the shower. And that's why D usually stayed outside in our dark backyard. He could see everything inside the shower without us noticing him, since it was pitch dark outside. I am from Tampa, St. Pete area, and came across the cutest little beach access at Upham Beach that never closed, and the beach chairs were never put up at night. I had been there once or twice late at night with friends, so I totally thought it was safe. I wanted to take my girlfriend, so one night on a full moon we both went, and we were just chilling and having a good time. There was a group of guys of about 1,000 feet from us partying, but eventually they left and we were completely alone. The full moon illuminated the sky beautifully that night. My girlfriend and I, both women, 21 at the time, were hanging out on the beach chairs when I decided that I wanted to go see the water. She told me to be careful and that it was dark down there. The beach chairs were maybe about 20 feet away from the shoreline. I told her I'd be fine and went to watch the waves, which were especially loud that night. My girlfriend was just messing around on her phone and I was watching the water. Probably about 2 minutes into being down there, I had a feeling that I needed to check in with her and looked up to see her screaming my name and waving her hands, trying to get my attention. I looked to the left of me and across the way. There was a man in a hoodie staring at me. I had no idea where he came from. I was alone just a moment ago. I started running up the sand dune to get back to her at the beach chairs, and she told me that the man came from the parking lot, running at me full force until we realized that she was sitting up there. The guy followed us up to the section of chairs and was staring at us from the other side of them with this sort of eerie stillness about him. No one made a single movement or sound, and we could just feel his piercing eyes burning into us. We both felt like he was making a decision in his mind of whether or not he should continue whatever it is that he came for. It felt like forever, and he was looking at us like we were prey, but realistically, it was only about a minute or so before he simply just rushed away. So many scenarios were going through our heads, and we both felt in true danger for our lives. We were petrified. We immediately ran to our car and called the police, but we never heard anything back from them. We both recollected this night many times and agreed that if this was all a big misunderstanding, and he never truly meant us any harm, he would have said something or apologized when we were cornered at the chairs. The way he looked at us and the vibes we got from him that night, I can't even imagine what his intent was. Thank God my girlfriend got the feeling to look up from her phone and see him coming at me before it was too late. I have searched for articles of incidents like this near the area and have never found any other experiences like mine. All I know is that it was my last time going to the beach at night, alone or not. Definitely stay away from this place, and it still makes my stomach crawl thinking about it. In my teen years, think late middle school, high school, my family had a seasonal site at a campground. I spent most weekends during the summer and a couple of long holidays there. We had a small group of friends, mostly consisting of other kids of seasonal campers, and befriending random one-off campers was not uncommon. One particular weekend towards the end of the season, I met Mike. We quickly hit it off and became really good friends, playing and trading Pokemon on our Game Boys, hanging out at fires, playing some basketball, and doing usual camp stuff. Mike's dad had invited a few family friends for the weekend, including Andrew. Andrew was a couple of years older than me. He could drive and had a big van to which he attached a tent through the trunk, and to have what we thought at the time was a pretty sweet setup. During the long weekend, we all hung out and had an awesome time. Come Sunday, Mike, his dad, and most of the party left. Andrew stayed behind. We hung out a little, and he would brag about dirt bikes, ATVs, and TVs and other stuff that he had an abundance of, and he kept implying that we should hang out sometime outside of camp. I responded with something like, yeah, maybe, knowing that typically camp friends were never more than camp friends. Eventually, he went home on Tuesday, and I didn't hear from him after that. He gave me his number, but I told him I didn't know mine off the top of my head, but I'd call him. Important for the rest of the story, Andrew never knew more than my first name. My mom remarried, and I do not have the same last name as her or my stepdad. Now fast forward about a year, I'm using AOL Instant Messenger and get a message from someone with the exact same name as me with an added number. After a few reluctant messages, they reveal that it's Andrew. It's a bit off-putting, so I just block him. Then I receive a second random message from him using the same name but increasing the number in the screen name. We go through this for about a week, during which I block about 8 of his fake accounts. It gets so bad that I create a new profile with a different email and make sure not to include any personal information, although I'm still pretty sure that the original account had none included. About 9 months go by and I don't hear anything from him. One evening, while my family is eating dinner, there's a knock at the front door. My mom calls my name and says I have a friend visiting. It's Andrew. We politely ask him to leave, and after about 15 minutes or so, he finally gives in and goes. And then the calls start. First from a number registered to him, which we screen with caller ID, and then restricted numbers, which we ignore. After that, calls from random numbers with local area codes. When he manages to get through the screenings, usually when younger siblings would answer, he acts like we're best friends, asks me to hang out, and offers me free stuff. I tell him to stop calling, but he doesn't listen. My mom tells him I moved in with my dad, but the calls keep coming. Eventually, my mom tells him that she's going to call the police, and things calm down a bit. 1 more year passes. Back at the campground, I'm walking a lady friend that I had met that weekend to her campsite when a van pulls up alongside us, and I hear someone call my name. I look over to see Andrew leaning out of his van. We booked it and ran into a small patch of woods, and then returned to my family's site to tell my mom what was going on, and she flipped her lid. She ended up pounding on the campground owner's door, waking them up as it was about 11 p.m. at this point. The police got involved, and he was told to never contact me or show up at my house again. The next morning, a family staying at the campground came over to talk to my parents. Apparently, they knew Andrew's parents and shared stories about episodes he would have. They mentioned that multiple people would need to hold him down until he calmed down because he would lose control and act sporadically and sometimes violently. I saw him once after that, about 3 years later, driving the very same van slowly out of an apartment complex I had moved into. Nothing came of it, but knowing that he saw me and the fact that I never saw him again makes me feel very uneasy about why he was there that day to begin with. This happened when I was 7. I was living in upstate New York with my 2 slightly older brothers. We would often hang out down the street at our friend's house. Our friend's name was Ben, and he was around our age. One late afternoon, my brothers and I went to Ben's for pizza and a movie. We spent most of the day there, so by the time we were done, it was pretty late. It was dark out, and we decided to head home. When we left, we saw a woman standing across the street from Ben's house. We were a little weirded out, but she seemed to be minding her own business. At this point, we were still in the driveway about to leave, and then this lady looked right at us and sprinted in our direction. Ben's mom always had her car parked in the driveway, so we sort of booked it back and around the car to try and hide/get away. She continued to try and follow us around the vehicle, and she kept trying to switch which direction she was running around the car in an attempt to get us. The whole time, she seemed to be laughing maniacally like some witch, saying how she wanted to catch us, and we were deathly freaked out, of course. She only stopped when Ben's mom came out and asked what was going on, after hearing the commotion of the cackling witch lady chasing us. And this crazy lady laughed while sprinting off and was never seen again, and Ben's mom walked us home that night. This was about 20 years ago when I was in elementary school, so I apologize for not being able to provide more details. I was probably around 10 or 11 years old, which is the age when etiquette and dance classes typically begin. The school organized a final dance or ball as a culmination of our lessons, and it was an occasion where we'd dress up. Being a shy kid, I felt relieved when an adult asked me to dance because it meant that I didn't have to worry about awkwardly conversing with another child. I had never seen this adult before, and I don't believe that he was part of the school administration or a teacher. Initially, he asked me regular questions, but then he posed a question about sensuality, and instantly I stopped dancing and sort of just froze. I didn't say a word because I had no idea how to respond to an adult inquiring about such an intimate topic. Due to the passage of time and only recently recalling this incident, my memory is quite hazy. All I recall is that he either grew bored because he was dancing with someone unresponsive, or I mentioned feeling tired and needing to sit down. He left me alone, and I don't remember dancing with anyone else that night. What I do vividly remember is seeing another girl at the dance who was crying, and I noticed police lights flashing outside. At the time, my 10/11-year-old mind couldn't comprehend what was happening, whether he had said or done something to her. However, it's only recently that I realized whatever transpired that led to them calling the police on him could have happened to me as well. I feel guilty for not immediately sharing what he said with someone, as they could have taken action and removed him from the event. I'm a 24-year-old female. I used to live in an old Victorian house in Maryland, and at the time of the story, I was 10 years old. This house had been turned into a duplex that split the 2 floors and basically just rented them as apartments. I lived in the upstairs. There was a university nearby, so we had a lot of college students, and we also had a lot of drug issues in the area. People were always getting their houses searched or getting into fights over it, and I don't remember much crime happening there that was unrelated to drugs. The owner of the house had told my family that the people who had rented the upstairs previously had given him a lot of trouble and he had to kick them out. My family had just moved there for my dad's new job, and we didn't have a place to live yet, so we were thankful that their contract ended early so we could take their place. If there was anything else the owner told my parents, it was not shared with me. I was homeschooled online and an only child, so my parents would leave for the day to go work while I stayed in the apartment and did my schoolwork alone. Maybe about a week after we had moved in, there was this loud banging on the door. I had ran down the inside stairs to open it, and there was this tall, thick man dressed in all black, with a black mask over his whole face, with holes for its eyes and mouth. As immensely stupid as this sounds, no alarm bells went off to me. This place was cold year-round, and I stupidly assumed that his snow gear just happened to be black. Behind him, I remember seeing a car parked next to the building that was still running. He just stood there silently for a couple of seconds, and I felt awkward, so I said, "Hi, can I help you with something?" He continued to just stand there for what felt, to me, like forever, before saying something like, "I'm just here for the mail." I'm smiling and saying something like, "Oh, sure, you must have just moved out. My dad already brought the mail in this morning. Let me go see if there's anything." So I turned around and let the door wide open and ran inside to find the mail pile. I looked through it, but didn't see anything that didn't have my family's name on it, so I went back to the door. When I went back to tell him the bad news, he was gone, and so was the car. When they came home that evening, I told my parents, unaware that the previous renters had stopped by and asked for their mail. My dad had a fit and said that I shouldn't have opened the door while I was home alone, and that apparently our mail comes from the owner since he separates it before bringing it to each renter's box since we had the same address, so we wouldn't have gotten in any mail that didn't belong to us anyways, and that the previous renters would already know that. He was furious with me for being a moron, and that was before he thought to ask what they looked like, and I described the all-black suit and mask. I know enough to know that I handled this situation entirely wrong and am beyond stupid, and I'm not looking to get berated for it. I would actually like to hear if you think if this suspicious guy had malicious intentions. Why didn't he do anything? I was home alone. It was morning, so my parents wouldn't have come back until evening anyways. I don't even think that the other renter was home. I clearly didn't suspect anything from him and left the door wide open while I turned my back to him and ran inside the house. I am immensely thankful that nothing happened to me. I don't ever want to appear as ungrateful that this didn't take an awful turn. I just don't understand what protected me, if that is actually the case. This happened to me a few weeks ago in New York City. I, a 23-year-old female, was walking to an appointment in Midtown. It was morning. I had my headphones in. This older woman was walking towards me and started urgently waving me down as I passed her. I slowed down and take an earbud out because I'm curious. She immediately starts telling me how her friend was supposed to meet her right where we were and wanted me to call him for her because she didn't have a phone. And then she's like, "It'll be just a second. His number is," and starts rattling off a number. I don't know why, but I found myself starting to actually type this number out to call it when everything clicked. I don't want this random guy that she's calling to have my number. My gut said it was a bad idea to call, and also I was going to be late to my appointment. I was just like, actually, sorry, I gotta run. Try using a phone in one of the stores." She flips a switch and starts yelling at me, telling me to go F myself, etc. I put my earbud back in and just hauled it away from her. When I was a bit further away from her, I looked back and saw that she wasn't stopping anyone else. Anyways, you think this was some kind of scam? Maybe drug-related or just a crazy person? Or something more sinister? It was pretty freaky either way, especially the way that her demeanor just changed on a dime. My friend and I are both young females, small petite build. We had been drinking at a hotel and decided to walk to the main strip, about a 20-minute walk at around 9:45 p.m. We're laughing, listening to music, and just having plain fun at this point. Now this is when things started to go south though. Out of nowhere, a lady pops out in front of us. She obviously looks like she's on something. She's twitching, walking super funny, and she's on the phone. Now this is important. So my friend and I stepped around her because she was initially going the opposite way of us. Then all of a sudden, she walks past us, and while she's getting ahead of us, she's looking back and speaking into the phone. I, for some reason, was already feeling kind of uncomfortable, so my friend and I slowed down to let her stay in front of us, but we decided to go to the other side of the street because why not? The lady sees this, speaks into the phone again, and crosses with us. I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, thinking that maybe she's uncomfortable and feels unsafe, and is trying to use us as a cover, but my gut was telling me otherwise. So while she's walking in front of us, she still frequently is looking back and talking into the phone, so we cross the street to put some distance between us. This time, the lady almost turns down the street where a man wearing all black walks out in the same direction we were going. The lady stops at this cross street and just stares at us, and then she steps behind some kind of bush, I guess. The man went about 300 feet in front of us on the opposite side of the street and then turned around and walked back to the same cross street the lady was at. We were still speed walking, so where they supposedly stepped off to was now out of sight. My friend was local to the town that I was staying in, so she was already calling a friend who lived 2 blocks down to come and get us. Around this time, I look back and see both of them speed walking towards us. At this point, I'm trying to make it obvious that I've noticed them by turning around, pointing, and even yelling. Luckily, when they were about 2 blocks away, her friend arrived and we were able to speed off. I just wasn't sure if their entire plan the entire time was some type of kidnapping or trafficking expedition. Okay, so a few years ago, I lived in an apartment complex in San Antonio, Texas. I, a 26-year-old female, lived there for about 4 years with a couple of my best friends. So over the years, I would run in a neighborhood that was close to our apartment complex. I've actually had a couple of weird things happen to me throughout the years running through there, as well as at our complex, but this event was the most terrifying moment of my life and caused me to stop running in that neighborhood altogether until life finally found my friends and I moving to different cities. So over the years of running in that neighborhood, I became familiar with this one house that gave serious trap house vibes. It was very out of place for the neighborhood as there was an elementary school just up the street and the area is not a high crime area. It was a corner house that was at the first stop sign of my running path, so closest to my apartment, and housed a group of about 6 huge men. That's usually about how many I would see together at one time, and they always had people coming and going, and it sounded like they threw a never-ending party, and their property smelled strongly of weed. As a woman and an avid watcher of crime documentaries, I'm constantly paranoid and observant of my surroundings, which is why I'd come to know that house so well. Throughout the years, I'd always managed to see them, but they never saw me. But the last year we lived there, that changed. And just so y'all know, it was not dark at all during this event. The sun was out and shining brightly, and it was about 5:30 p.m. or so. So I'm at the start of my path, and I'm coming up to that first stop sign in the house. Per usual, I look for them in their vehicle and any potential traffic, and I see that they aren't home. They only had one vehicle that they would all pile into, and it was a big black Tahoe or something. I continue on my run, which takes me further up past that house into another neighborhood where I would run around in a cul-de-sac a few times before running back down that path. I'd say about an hour and a half passes by, and then I decided to head home before the sun starts to set and it gets dark. As I'm running home and coming up to that house and the stop sign, I'm listening to music and running and see that I'll need to stop at the stop sign because of traffic. I'm coming up to that sign, which puts the house to the right of me and stop sign for the four-way intersection to the left of me. I credit what happened next to trusting my instincts, remaining observant and being in band and softball. I was honestly really tired from my run, so I was kind of looking down at the ground rather than ahead, but I always utilized my peripheral vision. Shout out to being a band nerd. If you know, you know. So I take off to run across the street to the sidewalk that will take me to the fence on the side of my apartment complex. It didn't have a door. I would just either hop it or slide under to run down that path. And I see that the vehicle had been stopped at the stop sign perpendicular to me, and the vehicle that I know to belong to that house that was just on the right of me. Out of the corner of my eye, I see them turn like they're going to go down their street when I think, that turn seemed too wide, like a U-turn, which is weird since their house is right there. I take all of 2 tired steps, I was out of energy at this point, before I get this sinking gut feeling. I have never in my life felt this feeling before, but I immediately felt danger at my back, and everything in my body and mind told me to run for my life. So I did. And with that feeling of fear in my stomach and danger on my back, I sprinted down the sidewalk with renewed vigor and slid under the fence like I was sliding to home plate. I immediately popped up and turned around to look outside the fence where I had just been, and I saw them. The group of men that I had only ever seen in passing were sitting in their car on the street outside my apartment complex fence, with their windows down, and all 6 of them staring directly at me. We stared at each other for what seemed like a long time before I watched them drive away, and once they were out of sight, I ran like hell to my apartment and locked myself in there, scared to show them exactly where my apartment was, as I was worried that they were circling the complex lurking for me. I told my friends what had happened and spent the rest of the night full of adrenaline, pacing and reflecting on what had happened. Those men purposely chose to not go home, but pull a U-turn to follow me as I ran. Recounting the story over the years, I've had people tell me it was so they could view my butt as I ran, but when I remember that feeling in my body that was almost a voice in my head yelling at me to run like my life depended on it, and think of their blank faces and dark eyes staring at me from inside that vehicle, I seriously question what their true intentions were that day. I live in a small town, and a few years ago our local market had taken up new owners. They fired all of the employees and completely redid everything, including obviously hiring an entire new staff. At the time, I'd been a regular for around 5 years. It was super convenient because I lived down the street. I didn't have a car then, so I shopped there daily, sometimes multiple times a day. I had built up a rapport with the original owners, the elderly, and banter with the original employees, older locals. I only knew one person's name because she asked after a year of exchanges, and turned out we shared the same name, but that's about where any passing relationships ended. Moving forward, new owners, reopening new staff. I got a new car, and my business there wasn't as frequent but still pretty consistent, needing a drink, snack, or missing an ingredient for dinner. I'm a relatively friendly person, but also super anxious, especially with men I don't know. So when the new staff came in, I would wait in line, smile, say hi, pay, thank you, and dip. They were all friendly, but one cashier was just a little too comfortable. He would lean over the counter. And when I said I didn't need a bag, he would put my stuff in one anyway and touch my hand, casually, I guess, when handing it over. It made me feel super awkward and off. I also did a local yoga class and after class, and me and the other woman would go get drinks at the market and walk around to catch up. The creepy cashier would always make weird conversation about our class. I stopped going for a little bit, and then my car decided to stop working, and I had no choice but to start frequenting the market again. The creepy cashier was excited to see me and asked where I'd been. I don't remember what I'd said, but kept it casual. Over the weeks, he creeped on me. He never asked me my name, but had asked if I was married, seeing my ring. He also asked 1,000,000 times if I had Instagram or Facebook. I glazed over the Instagram question by saying that I haven't had Facebook since high school, which is true, sort of bypassing lying about not having an Instagram. It usually worked and ended our conversation. Finally exhausted evading his questions, I caved when he asked again if I had an Instagram. I said yes, and that I don't really use it a lot. Oddly, during that transaction, the register was quote-unquote on the fritz, as he would put it. My card wouldn't swipe, so I handed it over, and he had to manually add the card, and I was on my way. I went home, made dinner, put on something to watch, and scrolled on my phone. I saw I had a friend request, and my jaw dropped. It was the creepy cashier. I instantly lost my appetite and felt so uncomfortable. After deducing that he got my full name off my debit card and then looked me up, it made me sick. I denied the request. Several hours later, another request, along with a message, "What you up to?" Denied the request, ignored the message. Over the course of 2 days, there were multiple requests with multiple messages saying, "How are you? How's your day? Hey," a heart, trying to engage me in conversation with multiple selfies. Who sends selfies anyways? I continued to ignore him, and then I just blocked him. I ended up talking to a friend, and she said that she always felt uncomfortable and that he tried to walk her home one night. He stopped working there a couple of weeks later. Apparently complaints were made. I'm not shocked. In retrospect, I should have been more direct, no nonsense in my response with him, but I felt so anxious and uncomfortable, especially since it was down the street from my house. I would like to preface this by saying that I was 17 when this happened and was incredibly dumb, mentally ill, and addicted to drugs. I'm now 26, and I'm well aware of how dangerous of a situation I'd put myself in, but with that being said, let's begin. I was out with friends on campus drinking and smoking all night. I separated from them at some point and ran out of cigarettes. I was doing uppers all night and really needed them. I went to school right outside of Yonkers in the Bronx, so it was not the safest area in the world by any means, but I didn't care, so I walked down to the nearest bodega to get some cigs. The cashier wouldn't sell me any because I was underage and didn't have my ID. There was one other man in the bodega, a 65-plus-year-old scraggly-looking man who overheard our transaction and began to defend me to the cashier, saying things like, "Come on, man, she just wants some cigarettes." The cashier wouldn't sell them to me and wouldn't let the other customer buy them for me, so this man, Carl, told me that he had some cigarettes at his house, which was only a minute away. Like I said before, I really wanted a cigarette. So I hopped into his beat-up truck, and he starts asking me why I'm out so late, and my intelligent self told him that I was out partying all night and was currently on a bunch of coke. He started telling me about himself. He said that he was out picking up old appliances and selling the scrap for money, and asked if I wanted to help him. I thought, why not? This'll be a funny and random story, so I said yes. We go around to a few different neighborhoods and houses picking up air conditioners and heaters. I remember that I got a cut from the metal at some point and was bleeding a little, but not seriously. And so we do that for about an hour, and then he's like, "All right, your cigarettes," and says we're gonna stop at his house. We pull up, he opens the door, and I barely walk inside because this is obviously weird, plus there were about 10 other guys in there, mostly younger, like 25 to 30, who were kind of looking at me weird, and they were being nice but looked a bit confused and didn't talk much. Carl said he just had to get something. but all he did was pace chaotically back and forth around stacks of papers and backpacks and never actually took anything new with him. He didn't even grab the cigarettes. The vibe was off, and I wanted to leave, so I didn't bother saying anything. We got into his truck after that, and he offers to roll up a blunt. I said yes, and so we smoked and sat in his car on a random street in the Bronx. He's been giving me small compliments all night, and I didn't think anything of it. I knew this guy was kind of creepy, but I figured I could use it to my advantage to get what I wanted. But he started talking more deeply about how beautiful I was, and then directly after tells me he has a daughter my age, and I kind of look like her. Gross. I am kind of concerned at this point, but didn't really know how to end the interaction as I was sitting in his car on a random street in a potentially unsafe area. Mind you, I was in my freshman year, and only 2 months in, so I had no familiarity with the area. After we finished smoking, he offers to take us to the deli for some cigarettes. Finally. And a breakfast sandwich. How could I refuse? He goes in and gets us 2 bacon, egg, and cheeses and a pack of Marlboro Red 100s for me. He gave me the sandwich and then asked if I wanted to keep hanging out with him, but he also made it clear that if I didn't want to, that's okay, and he would drop me off back at campus, and I said I wanted to go home. He takes me back, which was only about 3 minutes away from the deli we went to. I said thank you for the cigarettes and sandwich, but before I got out of the car, Carl tells me that he wants to see me on Valentine's Day. I said maybe, and he became adamant that I hang out with him on Valentine's Day, so I eventually just said yes and get out of the car. I got home at around 5 a.m. This whole interaction only lasted about 2 hours, so there was no lapse or me forgetting a period of time. And thank God my friends were still somewhere on campus to retrieve me. I told them everything, and they were so mad that I would do all of that alone, and thought that it was weird as hell that I picked up scrap metal with him. It was. A few months later, I get a text message. I gave him my number. Really stupid. And it's a picture of a very young, probably around my age at the time, clean and handsome Hispanic man, while the man I was with was a 65-year-old scraggly black man. He sent the picture along with, "Hi, do you remember me?" I obviously blocked the number, and then nothing ever happened again. Was this just some random, slightly creepy and lonely man who wanted something similar to a girlfriend experience for the night? Or something way scarier? I was thinking maybe he was going to try to take me back to his house and try something weird, but then realized that there were a bunch of people home, so he couldn't and just backed out, smoked a blunt, and dropped me off. Who knows, but it was definitely super creepy, and regardless of his intentions, I think I came out of this situation very lucky. So I'll admit this is pretty mild compared to a lot of stories, but it was creepy enough to make me nervous. I was walking to work this morning and I passed by a park where a few homeless people tend to congregate. As I'm walking by, I hear, "Hey," and I glance over to my right and there's 2 guys sitting at a picnic table maybe 50 feet away, and a few other people milling about a little further away. Wasn't sure who the "hey" was directed at, so I just kept walking. Then I hear, "Hey, shorty." I ignored it. Then it was, "Hey, shorty, come here." I called back, "I gotta go to work," an excuse that happened to be true. Didn't think too much of it until I got about a block past the park and heard faint voices behind me. I looked and 2 guys, I assume the same 2 guys since there was no one behind me previously, were walking behind me. It didn't seem like they were trying to catch up with me, but I picked up the pace and crossed the street to a gas station. I wandered a bit through the store and picked up a few things for lunch and then went to get in line to pay. Just then, 2 disheveled guys walked in the door, saw me, and were both eyeballing me hard and kind of whispering things to each other. And this is when my nerves really started screaming because I immediately knew that they were the 2 guys from the park, and they were both huge guys. Not fat, but very tall and very husky. I'm only 5'2", and they were easily 6'3"-ish. I checked out and went by the door, on my phone acting like I was waiting on a ride or something, but really I was watching them and waiting for an opportunity to leave safely. They kind of half-heartedly browsed around, not actually picking anything up, and the second they were out of sight behind a shelf, I booked it out of the store. I immediately got out of sight of the store windows, weaved between a few buildings, and crossed a couple of streets so I was a few blocks away pretty quickly. This way, they wouldn't be able to look down the main street and easily see where I had gone. It was about half a mile more before I got to work and made it without incident. It could have been nothing. They might have been planning to go to that gas station anyways, but my gut was telling me otherwise. Me, a 16-year-old, and my sister, 15, went to a nearby Goodwill to find some athletic wear for her. It wasn't that long after that we entered that my dad approached me and gave me his clothes to hold as he wanted to smoke a cigarette outside. I had always stuck to the buddy system when alone, but I figured as my dad could see me and I was within earshot of my sister that I was able to browse the clothes. There wasn't much at our Goodwill. It was after I turned down an aisle where the books and CDs were that I noticed a man in a bright blue shirt was behind me. I had initially thought nothing of it and browsed the records, but I started to get this weird and itchy feeling after I noticed that he kept on inching closer. At the time, I already found a record and was debating if I should quickly turn and walk off, but I was admittedly stupid and didn't get away as fast as I wanted to. He seemed really icky and creepy when he was pretending to browse the lack of books. I wasn't there for long before my dad had found me and told me it was time to go. I was incredibly grateful for his timing as I was feeling really tense and anxious. My dad even told the man to back up and watch how close he was, but the man didn't even react. He just stayed hunched over, looking at the same shelf of books. I quickly turned the conversation to something light as my sister came over when we were walking to the counter and kept it that way for the rest of our outing. But what made me feel worse was the fact that the man, not even 5 minutes later as we were checking out, had moved from the spot and was now looking at us. Not only that, but he had moved to another location in the store, further away in the women's section, and staring at us for a bit and then started to act like he was looking around. The whole ordeal was really uncomfortable and was the first I'd ever experienced it firsthand. Even I had doubts that maybe he was browsing and wasn't being a creep, but the fact that he kept on inching closer and even watched us check out continued to stay on my mind the whole time. It just made me feel really out of place. He didn't come out of the store or follow us from what I can tell. We went to 3 other places afterwards, but it was such an unforgettable experience. When I was 15 or 16, I used to sneak over to my boyfriend's house that was just around the block. I wasn't allowed to date him because crazy stepdad and all. Anyways, I leave his house to meet up with my friends. It's summertime in Chicago, about 5:30 or 6. Still light out, but the sun is starting to set. In my town, a bunch of kids would meet at this convenience store that was kinda in the middle of our tiny town. My boyfriend and I lived all the way on the opposite side of this middle part of town. It's a super cute town. All the houses look the same, some bungalows. Trees line the nicely manicured lawns, and no matter where you are, you know someone that lives on a street or 2 away. Well, I was walking maybe 5 blocks away from my destination alone. I remember crossing a street and seeing this young guy cross from the opposite side of the road onto his side of the road. Think rows of blocks. I'm on a side, he's on a side. Not weird, but my Nana always taught me to be suspicious of anyone. Yes, I know it's not a healthy way to be, but this is what generational trauma does. So the guy is on the opposite side of the road, a little behind me. I'm aware of him and make sure that he knows this as I look at him. And this is something I've learned growing up. I'm just going on my way, not really concerned at this point. Now a block later, he crosses over and speeds up closer to me. I can't describe how or why, but this is when all my senses went to high alert. He's close enough that I can see his face and the look in his eyes. Maybe this is when I should tell you that I'm not even 5 feet. At this point in my life, I was well under 100 pounds. I'm very tiny. So I grab my phone, and I pretend to call someone, yelling so he can hear me, saying, "I'm coming up the stairs right now, hurry," obviously panicked. I dart up some random stairs to the front door. When I look back, he was right at the bottom of the sidewalk, out of breath, and made this look like F you and started to walk away. I snuck behind some bushes and waited a bit to make sure that he left and called my boyfriend and ran the last few blocks to meet up with my friends. I mean, maybe it was nothing, but my gut tells me different. I still remember that guy's face, and from time to time to look up to see if anyone matches his description in the news. So I'm going to start off by saying that I'm non-binary and was assigned female at birth. I also really love trades work as it makes me feel empowered. Working with heavy machinery, wood, and other forms of trades excite me. Today I started a masonry class that goes on for 4 weeks, twice a week. Masonry, in case you're not familiar with it, involves brick and block laying, working with mortar, and learning the different branches of work in this trade. I was super excited. Some of my friends were there and it was great. We were working in the shop on small incomplete walls, smearing mortar so that we could prepare for block laying. Cue the creepy teacher. We have 2 teachers to ensure that everyone can learn the technique and proper work methods. Their names are Anne and CT. At first, I thought that CT was sort of funny, considering his age. However, the first time he tried to get my attention, he touched my arm and I felt very uncomfortable. I assumed that it would be a one-time thing. For context, being touched unexpectedly by people I don't know seriously freaks me out to the point of panic attacks. I have no idea why. Unfortunately, it was not the last time. He soon came back, and this time from behind. He placed his hands on my shoulder, and I could feel how close he was. He whispered something about my technique in my ear, and, to get me to step aside, put his hand on my waist. I have never had this experience with a teacher before, let alone one I hadn't met. Shortly after, it was lunchtime. I found the woman who connected me to the class and explained that I needed to tell her how deeply inappropriate and uncomfortable he had made me feel. And long story short, the issue was escalated to the boss's boss. I don't know exactly what was said, but I know he received a formal warning about touching students without consent and was instructed to keep a distance of at least 1 meter from me or my work. I should also mention that most people in that class are cis men, and he never touched them or got that close. Needless to say, this is one of the creepiest teachers I've ever met. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. EST, and there are super fun live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit r/LetsReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, I love Undertime Slopper.